Shall I turn my camera off so it doesn't distract you?
Yeah, it might. It's, with Teams, it's a bit. It doesn't always come up anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Turn it off so it doesn't. Right, there you go.
Go to the beginning. Now, this is always a challenge for me. Okay, so can you see the screen now?
Yes, I can.
Brilliant. Okay. So in a nutshell, okay, what you're looking at is applying for a cluster project funded by the British Council, and you're going to be partnering, I think, is it with 4 other schools? I think Lauren has put in the list. So I think Sian's the head, is that right?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So she's already got the other schools on board, I think. And so in a nutshell, you'll have apply for funding to be working on the global goals together with your partner schools, and you've chosen to link with Nepal. So global learning in a nutshell is oh, hang on, I got pop-ups coming up now, I apologise. Informing learners about global issues, but also equipping knowledge, skills and attitudes to be active, ethical, informed global citizens. So lots of us advisors and people in the field in Wales often talk about global learning and CCGL as Donald's in a box. So it's a perfect project to really add some depth to what's happening in school. So the British Council are going to find your partners, and then there's lots of resources which I'll share with you in a bit. So we're just waiting on that confirmation of what schools you're going to link with in Nepal. And we've got a good relationship with the British Council office there. So in terms of communications, it should be quite good. And often the schools will have Wi-Fi access, so you can do meetings using Teams or Zoom, for example. And the aim with the partner school is then that you are both upskilling each other whilst taking part in training, but also then the pupils will do a pupil-to-pupil project. Now, zip through. Okay, so the project funding usually covers travel. And this is something I've spoken to Lauren about. Obviously, at the moment, everything has stopped, but the project has been extended to December 21. So that means you would get a full 12 months of the project. And you never know, with the news of vaccines, there might be travel in the autumn term next year, who knows? But what I would encourage you is to apply for the travel in the form, just in case there is an opportunity. And this is where I come in to help, because the form is complicated. But basically, you can apply for £500 to support resources for the project. You can apply for £250 for an event. Now, obviously, no face-to-face events are happening at the moment, but you know, in the future, hopefully by the summer term, there would be the possibility of that. There's supply cover for your school, so you would be the cluster lead school. So there'd be time for you or Lauren then to come together, and you can pay for supply to cover that. If you were to delegate some other roles to any of the other schools, you can cover the supply costs for that as well. And there is money for training, but at the moment, all the training is online, and so it's free. So if there is face-to-face training later on in the year, then again, there's funding for that. And you get 3 days of me. So I can help throughout the project and leading up to the application as well. Now, the funding,
Can I ask as we go along?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Right, so the 200, just the first one, the supply cover.
Yeah.
So to apply for that, we obviously need to have our application form in and that accepted first.
No, this all goes in the application form. So right. I always really encourage you to put in the maximum. So you'd put in 1,400 for that supply cover for the project. You'd also put in 2 collaborative projects, because you'd have one in your partner country and one here to provide the resources, and 2 events in both countries. Now, you know, that you might end up giving money back because you might not spend all of that, but it's better to ask for it and get it first, and then you know, deal with any lack of spending later on then. So you know, so it's quite generous. It's not massively generous, but it does give you more access to doing an additional project than you would just on your normal school budget. Okay, so the terms are something to get your head around, especially when you come to the application form. So the applicant is the lead school. So you would be the lead school. And whether or not you're splitting the roles with you and Lauren, you would be the cluster leaders or the cluster coordinators. And I'll send through a PDF to you that just specifies what that involves a little bit more. Now, in theory, they want you to have strong experience in global learning and partnership working. It's not always needed to be the case. But if you've done anything in the past that helps, then that can go into the application. But even if you've had other projects that show similar ways of working and sharing good practice and upskilling your staff or upskilling other schools in your cluster, then that's enough evidence to put in the application. Now, all the other schools in the cluster would be called partner schools if they want to take part in the visits. Okay, if they don't want to take part in the visits and from the get-go they say no, we wouldn't want to do any traveling, they could be called a network school, and they actually get more money for training because they would be a school that might be right at the beginning of their global learning journey. So they would get more money for training. So I think they'd get £250 for training, and they wouldn't necessarily have to do as much of the project work. So that's something we'll have to find out when we speak to the cluster schools. Do you know anything about the status on that?
No, I don't. All I know is that we are doing it with the cluster schools.
Yeah. Okay. It might be worth sending this PowerPoint out to them so they get an idea of what's it about before we kind of commit to the application. So it's centered stage on the SDGs. Do you do anything in school at the moment on the SDGs?
No.
So it's a really fantastic tool to actually address global learning and global issues across the whole school. And so these are the new goals from the Millennium Development Goals. So the UN got the Millennium Development Goals going, and then it's readdressed and realigned what are the priorities for every country to try and, of course, make our world a better, sustainable place.
Yes.
So there's so much good learning materials out there. The project would centre on one or two of these. Now, I've sent a current resource on the British Council to Lauren, which looks at SDG 3, which is good health and well-being. Obviously, coming out of lockdown and focusing on well-being for staff and children this term could be a good way in. And then it might be that you are interested, or you've got another project, maybe through eco schools or rights respecting schools or any other whole school project.
I've said no, but we do. But is it? There's an E. Is it EDG? I'm thinking now because we've got a display out there on the work that we do, and we're heavily into our health and well-being.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the initials. I'm sure I'm sure it's a different name.
Yeah, it might be to do with emotional well-being goals. I don't know actually. Then we'll have something to chat to Lauren about.
Yes.
When you see
her.
Yeah. But I've just focused in on SDG 3 as an example with her at the moment. But of course, there's loads of resources on all of these that you could have a quick look at. Now the framework of the project I've kind of simplified, especially because of COVID and difficulties with school closures and the new normal. So when it comes to doing the application, you have to do an action plan. And what my advice to schools is to split it across 3 terms. Well, you will have your first term is going to be January, and then after Easter will be your second term, and then you've got your autumn term as your final term for the project, because you're applying for the December deadline. And to see it as a project that you take time to build the momentum and you take time to build the partnership with your school. So that first term between January and Easter is very much about getting to know each other and sharing photos, sharing videos, getting to know the teachers. A lot of it has to happen via WhatsApp usually, but with Napoleon, you might, like I said, there might be a bit more technology in the school that you can do, Zoom calls and things. And then after Easter, that's when I would plan to do more in-depth teaching and learning about your chosen SDG, because then in your first term, you've got time to plan it more and get all your kind of contextual references from Nepal. And then in the last term, which is slightly tricky of the timing of the academic year here. So if you were to do some work with year 6, then that's going to be problematic because they're going to have left. So I would possibly think about doing year 5 or below, or working with the eco school, or making a new pupil voice group or something that could run the project. So then in that final term, it's very much about taking action. So the whole notion of the sustainable development is that, yes, we raise awareness, yes, we learn about them, but then we hand it over to the young people to take action for them. And then that is going, let me shut the door, sorry, we've got a drill going. Then you get something that you can measure, and you're kind of building the awareness beyond your school then. So whether that is an event that involves the community, or it might be a virtual event at this point. And that would happen in both schools, and hopefully lots of sharing along the way, and lots of celebrating and learning from each other. So that's the kind of layout in a nutshell. I've just put lots of reference points on there just to go back to help you do a little bit more thinking. And what's always useful with partners is sharing those celebration days that you have in school, because it always gives you little hooks to hang everything on. Any quick questions about that?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Heaps of resources on the British Council website. I've actually made a Padlet which spotlights some of them, because the British Council website is really huge, but sometimes it's really hard to navigate when you go into one and then you can't get back out of it. So I've put specific links on a Padlet which I'll share with you, which Lauren's already seen, which kind of helps you kind of go, okay, we are going to do SDG 3, let's look at their COVID resources, or we're going to look at clean energy, SDG 6, I think that is. And then you can kind of find it quite easily on my Padlet. Okay. This is where the bureaucracy begins. So there's a link that I've already shared with Lauren that you as a school would fill in that assesses your level of global learning, and it kind of it'll pull up a graph to show where your needs are, basically. So it's a bit of a baseline, and it will spotlight courses that you can do. And then there's a link to send out to the other schools in the cluster, just in Wales, to also do it, so that we can measure and see where they are. And those results do need to be put on the application form. But again, I will help you with all of that, because it can be a bit of a pain. And the link is further on in the PowerPoint. So it comes up like this. So you've got all the different courses at the bottom, so you can kind of spotlight what they are in the application. So this is actually an example from England, where there's a Global Teacher Award level 3, and that was clearly a priority for that cluster. So yeah, there's 3 providers in Wales: Welsh Centre for International Affairs, Sazani, and Think Learn Challenge. They do level 1 through to level 3 courses. Level 1 takes 2 hours, level 2 takes 6, and level 3 takes 12. So again, you might have differences in the cluster. You might have some staff that really want to go to town, they really want to upskill, they perhaps want to do further study, so they might want to be looking at level 3. Or you might have people that are at the beginning of their journey and want to start at level 1 and do some online training to just understand the global learning, active citizenship and strategies, etc. Like I said, a lot of things have been moved online now, so it's quite good. You can do it in your own time, but many of them structure it so that you can do a little bit of self-guided learning, and then you have a Zoom session with your cluster, and then you go back to finish the self-guided bit, and then you have another Zoom to kind of tie it all up. So that they've transferred things quite quickly and quite well. So yes, so the cluster grant is what you would be applying for. You've got your partners, you're okay. Like I said, we'd apply for the travel, and I've already said you get some support from me. So your role then, as the cluster coordinator and the cluster lead school, would be that you would be sharing your experience. Now, I don't want that to put you off, because there will be things that you do as a school and ways in which you approach things that might not necessarily be global learning, but those ways of working would be things that you could share with your cluster. You would take charge of the application. You would also be the contract holder, and you would receive the money. And you would then disseminate the money and do the bookings for things if you were to do travel. You would organise and kind of, chivvy the group and get them sorted with training. You would be liaising with the advisor. And like I said before, you'd get supply to be able to do a lot of those things. But I would work hand in hand with you as well, especially it depends on how experienced you are. Some schools that take this role have done things in the past. They might have been part of the global learning programme, so they're kind of good to go, and they just ask me to go to meetings now and again just to add another point of view. Whereas some other cluster leaders are new and they like me to help along the way, and that's fine. So either's good. Why take part? Well, I'm so used to being part of this world now. It always seems really obvious to me, but having real context that is live, and it might not be face to face, but to have that live partnership and feedback in real time just is amazing. You're not having to decipher a resource and second guess yourself as to whether or not you're saying the right thing, or pronouncing something correctly, or misunderstanding a cultural context. So to add that value to your school and that depth of experience is fantastic. So it's authentic, but it also brings up lots of challenges as well, because we're looking at different ways of living, different ways of understanding the world, different understandings of power and poverty. And I just think it's like the real life element of it is wonderful for pupils, and especially if you do get to have the face-to-face visits for teachers. But if not, having a way and using Teams in class is possible now. So I think it's really powerful stuff. So the next deadline is in 3 weeks, but that's doable. Lots of examples there.
3 weeks.
Yeah.
Shocking to think 3 weeks is the 2nd of December.
Terrifying, isn't it?
Yeah.
When it's done, you can, on your final reporting form, tick to say you'd like to be considered for the International Schools Award, the foundation, which is worthwhile. You don't necessarily have to add any more evidence in there. It just is part of the final report, which is good. That's a 3-tiered award, I think, which is really good to be part of. And this is the localized kind of things that need to be done by you guys in the next 3 weeks. Okay, so the British Council I've been in touch with, and they're allocating your schools. Self-assessment tool needs to be done. Lauren might have sent that out already. I've got the links on the PowerPoint. I'm going to put together a Google form for you to get school data. So you just basically will need all the cluster names of the teachers that are going to take the project on, their emails, numbers of pupils in the schools, gender balance, number of additional learning needs pupils. So it's a bit of a boring data trawl, but if I do it on a Google form, it's really easy. We'll need to set up a WhatsApp group, the obligatory WhatsApp group, I think, for everything. But we'll do that with the Nepalese schools as well. And then the British Council website, you've got to register and then go to the funding page to create an application. That I think I'll go through with you if I meet with both of you at another time. We can start that together, because that is a bit of a pain. Any ideas that you want to put on paper, I would do it all on Word. I've already sent an action plan kind of draft to Lauren that you can just use and just cut and paste. And then on my resource page, I've got all the different British Council resources that you could look at. I would share your draft Word application, obviously, with SMT, anyone else in the school interested, and the cluster for any feedback, and then start doing everything online and do it in time so that I can check it as well. So if it is done a couple of days before the deadline, then I can go through it. I can help add the boring budget bits to it, and then get it all ready to be signed off for the 2nd. Okay, so it is a bit fussy, but it's doable. It is really doable. I'm just thinking, have I got? Oh yeah, so there's the links for the self-assessment CPD.
Okay.
that's just some more links, and that is that. That was Whistle Stop. Normally takes an hour to go through that with a group of teachers. But yeah, that's probably quite useful for Lauren to just have me talking through that as well. So any questions that have jumped into your head straight away?
No, I was going to ask about the lesson plan and resources, but you've already covered that.
Yeah.
So really, we need to start the application form as soon as possible.
Yeah. Just looking at Word, really. First of all, just looking at the document I've sent. Now, if I share my Padlet with you on the screen, I can show you what to look for. Excuse my millions of things open. Can you see that application portal?
Yes.
So it's these horrible websites that you have to register with the British Council, then you need to log in, then you need to start a new application. So it's the Connecting Classroom grant application. And this is the bit that I would go through with you. So, but if you have it all on Word, it's easier to just cut and paste then. Because there's a way that what you can do is share it with the other people in the cluster to add things to as well, which might save time.
Okay.
But if I nip over to my Padlet, let's see. So this CCGL cluster resources now is just trying to make things simpler for everybody. So the sample action plan with key questions like the application is here in pre-application.
Right.
And then there's a guide to get in online on that application there as well. That's just the older version of the webinar I've just shared with you. Yeah. This is the form I'll turn into a Google form to make it slightly easier about getting the information. And that's the link to get started. What we've got, that is the next bit for you to look at then really, are these two columns to have a look at resources. Oh, actually 3 columns because we've got SDG 3 here as well. So that if you kind of look through some of those and think, oh, actually that would really fit with our context, then you can use that resource to help put your objectives in the action plan. But because of the situation we're in, I really, really would say you could keep the action plan quite generic, okay? Because, you know, things are changing. We don't know what's going on. We hope that we won't have another wave. But what you'll see on this one, I've put the key kind of questions that are in the form. But when it comes to the application here, it's quite general, so getting to know each other. It's not necessarily really SDG specific.
Right.
You know, sharing lockdown stories, sharing new normal stories. And then we're looking at the second term when you're going to be more focused on your SDG. And the outcomes for pupils would be a bit more specific according to what resource you might use. But if you see on this version, there's only a couple of boxes for that. So, you know, I would read this sample first before looking at any of the resources to kind of think, oh, okay, I understand how this is laid out and what kind of thing we need to include, but keep it quite open and flexible as well. You know, the biggest thing from the British Council is that all their resources look at core skills, and all these core skills are what, you know, is your bread and butter: critical thinking, problem solving, citizenship, leadership, creativity, imagination, digital literacy. You know, it's the things that you were doing day in, day out. So it's trying to choose maybe the key skills that you think your school might need, you know, or your year group might need. To try and hook it in a way that makes it easier to write, really, for you. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
There's lots to look at. So maybe it's worth you and Lauren sitting down doing that together, and then we could have another meeting, or maybe you have a meeting and like come in 30 minutes later or something, you know, so that you've had time to go through it all. Did you say you're meeting on Monday to talk about it?
Yes, we are. We've got Yeah, because we've got various other things to look at. So we've got the whole day out on Monday.
Yeah.
So if we spend some time on it on Monday afternoon,
Yeah.
and then could on Monday morning, and then could we have a meeting sort of around about any time, maybe 1 o'clock, 1:30 on Monday? Would that be possible?
Yeah, that's perfect. Should we say 1:30?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll let Lauren know. So you'll now send this recording to Lauren.
Yeah.
With my voice as well. That'll be
Well, I guess I'll stop recording now. I don't need to record anymore, do we? Can I stop it? Yeah, there we go. So I'll send